Grand Egyptian Museum, which is still welcome back, and still at the premises of the Grand Egyptian Museum, which is still under construction. This important and project opening will be soon in the coming few next year, or the following year, 2018. We are joined to talk more about the restoration section in the Grand Egyptian Museum by our guests, Mr. Ibrahim Abdel Fattah, and he's a metal artifact, and Mrs. Hadeel Khalil, restoration specialist. Hello and welcome to Nile Cruise.
Well, good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to start with you, Mr. Ibrahim, now for the metal restoration work. Now, have you received any of the metal artifacts? Tell me more about the works undertaken.
So, okay, first of all, I would like to introduce my lab. My lab is, the specialization is for inorganic artifacts, except stone artifacts, because stone artifacts has a special lab. So we are receiving metal artifacts, pottery, and viands, and glass objects. So we have received many objects made of different metals, starting from copper artifacts, bronze artifacts, which is a copper alloy, and other silver artifacts. We have received iron artifacts from the late period. So we are dealing with these artifacts. We are receiving them. We are doing the documentation of the artifacts, starting with documentation, photography, taking the measurements, all documentation work. Then we do the analysis and examination to determine which conservation treatment we are going to apply to the object. Then we apply the best conservation treatment. We are trying to be more preventive, and we are focusing more on the preventive conservation, which is a new trend in the conservation world today. And then we are giving a report for all this conservation and documentation work, and we are giving also a recommendation for storage and display and handling for each artifact.
Mr. Ibrahim, how it is different than in restoring the metal statue than the other ones? What's the difference?
Okay, so metal artifacts has a lot of unique techniques that we have to follow. In the past years, like 20 years ago or 30 years ago, they used to use chemicals more with metal artifacts. They were getting better results, but it's only upon the treatment was finished. But after 5 years, after 10 years, we realized, all the people working in the field realized that this chemical treatment has many cons, has many drawbacks, and it can give a good result at the same time, but after a few years, it's having a lot of damage affecting the object. So we are now reassessing all these treatments, and we are following the new trends in conservation. We are working more with reversible treatment, which we can reverse in the future, which has a less effect and less negative effect on the artifact. This is what we are trying. Like, we are using laser technique, we are using ultrasonic, more mechanical, more soft brushes, and we are using isolation techniques with other materials like coating and isolation with corrosion inhibitors, and we are going further to green corrosion inhibitors, try to avoid all chemicals that can damage the artifact in the future also, and it can affect the conservator itself, because we have health and safety policies that we have to protect the artifact and protect the conservator working with the artifact as well.
Well, Mrs. Hadeel, would you tell me more about the latest project you're working on? I understand that you're working on a very interesting project right now.
Yes, of course. Well, I work in the special project lab. Our mission in our lab is not just receiving artifacts, but also working and cooperated with other institutions, conservation institutions in Egypt, like the FAO and other institutions. So we received in 2012 a very interesting object, which is the Abu Rawash boat, which dated back to the reign of King Dan, which is the oldest boat in Egypt. It can date it back to 2,998 years old BC, so it's around 4,000 years old. When we received this object in our lab, this great boat, of course it's the traces of the boat. we started to make our examinations and investigations, and also the experimental studies, different experimental studies, and the archaeometry studies to analyze the deterioration aspects and to estimate how much is left from the wood. And then we started to make our conservation procedures on the boat. And then the last, we are coming to the last and the final step that we haven't finished it yet. We are going to put it on a support, a plexiglass support, which will take the whole boat shape in order to make the visitor to imagine how this boat looked like back then.
Okay, Mr. Ibrahim, the restoration process, how long should it take? When you finish an artifact, when it should be restored again?
Okay, so we are, as I said before, we are applying more, we are going more with a preventive conservation technique, and this is actually what you mean exactly, because when we apply more preventive conservation technique, we mean like we are controlling and monitoring the environment. We are creating, actually sometimes we are creating a mini environment.
But I'm talking about the current restoration. Okay. How long it lasts?
It lasts as long as you keep this environment controlled. It will last for many years, like maybe 50, maybe 100 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, but as long as you keep the environment, because the environment, if you control the environment around the object, you control the deterioration factor, you can prevent the further deterioration in the future. So because this is the main factor, that the main cause for deterioration and damage is the environment around the object. So if you control the environment around the object, you control all the deterioration factors, you keep the artifact in a good shape, in a good state for a long time.
Mr. Ibrahim Abdel Fattah, the metal restoration specialist, I'd like to ask you about the copper statues of King Pepys II. Now, will these remain in the Egyptian Museum, or will they come to the Grand Egyptian Museum? Will they need any restoration work? Do you have information about them?
Yeah, I think this is one of the masterpieces from the Old Kingdom, and it will arrive here in the Grand Egyptian Museum, which will be the largest collection of the Egyptian collections, the Egyptian artifacts. And it doesn't need a lot of conservation treatment. It needs a lot of work for the preventive conservation, as I mentioned, and for the display perception and display context, that it should be appointed and mentioned, because this is one of the unique and masterpieces. It's made with hammering, and it's a hollow, and it's a very unique technique that used as this very old, in the beginning of the Egyptian civilization in Old Kingdom.
And it's interesting, is it true that they come in different sizes?
Yeah, I think it's 2 sizes of the statue. Yeah, and this is, as I said, this is one of the unique things about the statue. Yeah, that should be mentioned and appointed in the display at the Grand Egyptian Museum.
Mrs. Hadeel, what was the most important and beautiful piece that you've worked on?
Well, I believe it's the same piece that I talked before about. It's the King Danrine boat. Abu Rawash boat, because it's overwhelming to find a piece that's 4,000 years old, and the condition, of course, it's very deteriorated, but it's still there. It was very challenging to work with this piece, and the final result was overwhelming to see that it came together and made the shape. It was so beautiful to work with this piece in particular.
Mr. Ibrahim, I'd like to ask you about the miniature works, especially because a lot of the amulets and statuettes of the gods are tiny. They're metal, and that they are that size sometimes. Now, have you worked on any of them yet? Tell me more about the pieces you've done. What's hard when you're working on miniature pieces as well?
Yeah, I had the opportunity to work with one of this miniature, not from metal, but it made from faience. As I said, we are receiving also faience artifacts in my lab, and I had the opportunity. This was discovered many years ago, and it had been restored, but with not a proper material. Like this is what they use. This is what they used to do in the practice of the excavation. They just use what they have from materials in the excavation site to save the artifacts. So they used gypsum and they attached it. It was broken to 2 parts. It's just this size, like about 6 centimeters, and it's a statue. It takes the shape of Sphinx with Nubian features, so it was unique and amazing. We searched, we did a research to figure out about the shape, like the art history about this unique object, and we were able to find some examples at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and other example at the British Museum in London. And after this art historical research, we did the conservation treatment. We tried to remove all the traces and all the pieces of the previous restoration with improper material, and we did a lot of experiments to apply the best and the best, as I said, the best conservation treatment technique and materials. We tried different materials with different techniques, and we used finally a transparent rods we created in the lab to restore this, and it's transparent. It's not distracting the viewer. It's not distracting the viewer or the visitor who are seeing the artifact, but it's giving the idea of the restoration and it's giving the idea of the artifact itself.
Mrs. Hadeel, as an Egyptologist, I used to ask this question: what is a weird story or a story that shocked you? You have learned about the pharaohs.
Well, I can say that when you're a conservator and you're holding such pieces with high techniques and therein, it's really shocking that they managed to reach this perfection of work and the symmetry. You can find pieces with high definitions and high reliefs and very, very fine writings. You can find, like my colleague said, he just conserved a small statue. Well, this is challenging for the rain to have a very fine instrument.